What is routing? Explain attribute-based routing in ASP.NET Core. It is a very important concept in MVC and Web API. The simple answer is routing in MVC is the process of mapping a URL request to a specific controller action in a web application. Okay. For example, see this controller. Now when the request will come, then by looking at the URL, .NET Framework will automatically identify that this home in the URL is the controller name and this index is the action method name. This automatic mapping via URL is routing. Now some more points are: the routing system is responsible for directing incoming request to the appropriate controller based on the URL. Second is, the routing system is typically configured using a routing table which maps URLs to the controller action. Routing is automatically maintained by .NET Framework, so this routing table is also automatically maintained. Okay, you need not to write any code for this. Now the question is, what is attribute based routing then? Now sometimes you want to modify this default routing mechanism. Okay, for example, in example here, this URL says that the request will go to the home controller and this action method name will be about. But in the code you can see we do not have any about method. But here we have one root attribute with this about in the name. Okay, but the actual method name is go to about. So this will redirect this attribute based routing will redirect this about to go to about action method. So that is what is called attribute based routing, because we are modifying the default behavior of routing by using this. The definition is, attribute based routing is used to manipulate the default behavior of routing in ASP.NET. Great, now it's clear to you. Explain default project structure in ASP.NET Core application. Here in the screenshot you can see the default structure when you will create the project for ASP.NET Core first time. Okay, here we have www root. It stores static files of the applications like CSS, JS, images. All the static files will be reside there in this folder. Second important file is app-settings.json. This stores the configurations like database connection strings and other things will be saved here. The configuration basically which are required when the application is in running form. Then the third is the program.cs file. This is the entry point of the application. When the request will come, it will first go to the program.cs file only. Previously there was a startup.cs file also, but from .NET 6.0 all the code of the startup has been merged to this program file only. Okay, now in case of web API, this views folder will not be there. And if you are again this, so this is like a very high level structure and anyone can ask you like what is app setting, what is program.cs file. So we should know what is the project structure. Again, a very small question: how ASP.NET Core serve static files? Now, when you will create the ASP.NET Core project, then you will automatically get this www root folder, right? Now, this will contain all the static files. Now, here is the use static files method inside the configure method of startup class. This will enable the static files to be served to the client. So that means if some client will request for .html page, then this use static file is the middleware here who is responsible for serving that static page to the client. Okay, and same is written here also. And you can also see that it is called even before the MVC controller and authorization. The reason is, for static serving static files, no authorization is needed. Okay, it's just a static file, so that's why it is before the authorization. What are the roles of app settings.json and launch settings.json file in ASP.NET Core? Here is the app setting.json file screenshot present in the solution. It is in the solution, and the app setting.json file is an application configuration file used to store configuration settings, okay, such as database connection string or any application level global variables, etc. Okay, here in the screenshot of this file you can see how the connection string of database is stored here. Then what is launch settings.json file? If you will expand the properties of your project, then you will find this file, and here is the content of this file. Application URL is here, then we have port here and hosting configuration. All this information is required when the application is launching or starting. Remember and listen carefully, when the application is starting, that's why this file is called launch settings.json file. Now the definition is, the launch settings.json file is used to store the configuration information which is used to start the ASP.NET Core applications. So app settings store configuration which are used when the application is in running mode, and launch settings store configuration which are used to run or start the application. Okay, one is used to start the application and one is used to maintain the running, like sometimes you need the connection string, sometimes you need to connect to different database, different things. For that, app setting. So that is the app settings and launch settings file. Here is a short question. What are the various techniques to save configuration settings in ASP.NET Core? Alright, so what are the techniques? First and most important technique which we already know is app settings.json file, which is the default technique to save configurations like connection string and others. Okay, this is the first and default technique. Second technique is Azure Key Vault, which is mostly used when the application is hosted in Azure cloud. This is the most secure way, okay, and nowadays this is the this is very much in trend and every application is doing it. Then we have save settings sometimes in environment variables, sometimes next is in-memory.NET objects we can use, then command line arguments we can use, and sometimes some custom providers also we can use. So out of these techniques, first two, app settings.json and Azure Key Vault, these are the most popular techniques. What is CORS in ASP.NET Core? Why is CORS restriction is required? How to fix the CORS errors? Now, alright, this is a very important question and all three questions about CORS are at one place here. Let's see some points about CORS and then we will understand them with the help of the example, okay? So first thing is, CORS stands for Cross Origin Resource Sharing. It means CORS is a security feature implemented in web browsers that restricts web pages or scripts from making requests to a different domain other than that served the web page. So for example, if you have two domains, abc.com and xyz.com, so CORS will not allow abc.com to access xyz.com website. So that is like simply the CORS. But now let's see the example here. Suppose you have a web application like this, interviewhappy.com. Now if you request the data within the same domain like this, then you will receive the data smoothly without any problem. But in our next four cases, interviewhappy.com will send the request, but it will not receive the response because of CORS. First case is when you want to get the response from a different domain altogether. Here you can see the interviewhappy.com requesting the data from different domain xyz.com. So by default the response will not be sent and the error will be generated. Because CORS stands for Cross Origin Resource Sharing, and that means cross origins means different domains will not share anything. Now in second case, when you want to get the response from a subdomain, what is subdomain? Subdomain is putting API dot or something like this, anything before like a prefix. In that case also by default CORS will not allow the data sharing. Third case is when the domain is same but you are requesting from HTTP and the sender is HTTPS. And the last case is if the port number is different. In all the above four cases you will receive the CORS error. Okay, and here is the error. See, XML request at this URL from origin another URL has been blocked by CORS policy. Okay, this is the CORS error. Now the point is why CORS is required. Obviously because of security reasons. Okay, so that you can make your API more secure by default. Otherwise, any external website can try to access your data, right? That is why by default it is required. Now, sometimes we do not want this behavior. We want some external applications to access our data. For that, we have to fix this CORS error in .NET Core. For that, we have to do two things in startup class. First, add this ASP.NET Core.CORS nugget package to your project. Secondly, in startup class, edit the configure file and configure services file method like this. First, add this add code service in the configure services, and then call middleware use codes method like this in the configure method. This will make sure that any cross-domain application can access your application now. Okay, so that's how we will fix the CORS error. So now you know what is CORS, why it is required, and how to fix it if you do not need it. What is in-memory caching and distributed caching? In-memory caching is the normal way of caching. In this, cache is stored in the memory of a single or same server which is also hosting the application. Basically, the data is cached within the application, okay? Distributed caching is when you want to handle caching outside of your application. A different server is used for stored cache data in distributed caching, okay? In-memory caching can be implemented with the iMemory cache interface in ASP.NET Core. Distributed caching can be implemented with the help of Redis cache. What is Redis cache? Redis is an open source, highly replicated, performant, non-relational kind of database and caching server. See this diagram, the flow is same as of normal caching. Only difference is Redis cache server is not the part of application server. It is separate. Now the last question is when to use which caching. In normal cases where the application size is small, use in-memory cache, the normal way of caching. But where application size is very big or it's microservices based architecture, there you can use distributed caching to improve the performance. Okay? How to handle errors in ASP.NET Core. Now here I'm not talking about the exception handling, but it's slightly different. It is error handling based on the application environment, whether it is development, staging or production. That error handling I'm talking about, okay? Now sometimes you want to see few things in development environment, but you do not want to see the same things in production or live environment, okay? For example, if any error will occur while coding, when you are in development environment, coding environment, then you want to see the error page, right? So that you can fix that error, right? But you do not want to see the same error page in live environment. Otherwise, the actual users will also see the same error page. So for that, you set up some custom error page for live environment, right? So that separation between the development and production environment, that configuration can be set up here easily in the .NET Core project. See the code of a startup class configure method here. If the environment is development, then it will show the exception page, okay? And if the environment is any other environment like staging or production live, then it will show the custom error page, which the name of the page will be error here, okay? Now where to set whether the environment is development or production? That you can set in launch settings file. Remember, everything related to when the project is starting is that configuration is stored in launch setting. And here you can set the ASP.NET Core environment value to development and staging or production. If you set the environment development, then env.above in the code env.isDevelopment will be true. Otherwise, it will be false. So that's about handling the error in ASP.NET Core. Here is a short question. What are Razor pages in .NET Core? Now, similar to MVC, there is one more development model which is supported by .NET Core, and that development model is Razor pages. So while creating your projects, you can select either MVC or either Razor pages also. Now, the basic thing is Razor pages follows a page-centric development mold, just like ASP.NET Web Forms. So if you are a fan of web forms, then you can pick this model for your next project. Okay, so it supports all the .NET Core features, because web forms are not there in .NET Core, but yes, these Razor pages are very much similar to them, so you can use it.